Hey, Brandon, thank you so much for joining me on the Question Guide podcast. Of course, this is Dr. Keith McNally, and today we're going to talk about something that I've only talked with one other person and on the podcast, and that's about humor. And I always say I'm not a funny guy. I'm not a funny guy by nature, but the people that I'm talking to more and more tell me that I'm wrong. But we're about to find out. I'm not quite sure. And so we're actually going to talk about humor in the workplace and how it's used and how can it be used effectively and naturally by leaders in the workplace. Brandon, give us some of your backstory if you don't mind, because maybe some of my listeners and those who are viewing this don't have a clue as to who you are, and I think they should.
Well, I couldn't agree more. First of all, thanks, Keith, for having me here. I happen to think you have a tremendous sense of humor. But yeah, I'm Brandon Ficara. I had a career as a stand-up comedian for 20 plus years since 1997. That just hit me like a brick. Also, I've simultaneously had a business career in sales leadership. And I've been doing both simultaneously. With the pandemic, I still do stand-up shows. I actually have a show next month in Vegas.
Cool.
But I do much less. I barely do stand-up at this stage of the game. The pandemic kind of really slowed me down. And it's something I'll always do, but it's not something I'm trying to make money with anymore. But in the sales leadership end, that's something I still very much actively do. And I learned a lot about how to infuse humor into business and how not to do it. Most of the strongest lessons are the cautionary tales I've learned along the way.
Yeah.
But certainly there's been so many positive aspects to having the ability to be funny when you're leading people, and to be able to inject humor into the workplace. I've found it to be a lifesaver. I think it's been a tremendous advantage for me. And
so you actually do it. You actually can apply.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, I know you have got a background in comedy, so it does make sense. And so I'm not, but how? I mean, like, where would it be appropriate? And how is
Okay.
it appropriate? Like,
Sure.
it doesn't really make, because I've not seen it done, period, probably at all. And when I have heard it done, it's usually in a sarcastic, kind of very negative toned manner. I think very much, if I can, talk about the LinkedIn post that you did today, this morning, it can be done and very hurtfully too. And so there has to be some kind of caution. Can you kind of, well, I'm asking you a lot of questions because it's kind of my nature. So let's start with let's start with the good. I always think it's always good to start with the good and then kind of talk about how it may not be so good. So how's humor good? Like, how can it be applied?
Sure. And all questions are welcomed. I didn't come on the Question Guys podcast and expect to not get questions. So I knew what I was stepping into and I'm excited for it. Cool. So let's talk about the positives first. There's a lot of them. Especially in a leadership role. You have to understand first the dynamic. The dynamic is people are looking to you, not just for what the next task is to be done or to set the goals or do all the technical points of management, but they're looking at you to be a leader, to set the tone, to let them know. They're looking to you for cues on how they should be feeling about whatever's happening in the business or with their work. And so you're always being watched when you're in leadership. And you have a responsibility to signal the right things to your people. If you walk in, just to give for instance, on this point, if you walk into the office and you storm into the office, slam the door behind you throw your hat across the room, you go into your office and you slam the door, the office is going to be affected by that. That's not going to happen in a vacuum because people's livelihoods in one way or another depend on you. Whether it's for you to be good at what you're doing or just the fact that you could cost them their job or you have their future in your hands to some degree. Mm-hmm. So that's the dynamic. So now that we kind of have that, we understand the importance of a leader to the mood of their people. Now, when we talk about the positives of humor, is if you can infuse humor into your leadership style, it's going to have a positive effect on the mood. And again, we're just talking about, you made some negative examples. I'll get into the pitfalls.
Uh-huh. Well,
Next,
see,
but
now that you said that, and now my mind just is starting to run. So I'm going to trip over myself.
great.
The comic strip Dilbert.
Okay.
Are
Yes,
you familiar with it?
of course.
Okay. So is that like he's supposed to be some software, developer, and it's always about how he's interacting with management, which is this crazy looking sharp haired dude, bald in the middle, kind of like me. Um, so because it's always about this dichotomy about what's going on with the people and what's going on with the leadership, but yet he makes it funny because we're kind of poking fun at the corporate world.
Right.
So can leaders use those kind of, can they make fun of themselves, as
Absolutely.
as part of that? We're going to make things enjoyable, light, but still be professional in the workplace.
When you can, and there's levels to everything, right? So you don't want to make it awkward, going in on yourself, or make it even too personal. But I think when you can show a sense of humor about your own flaws, it allows people to feel more comfortable with their flaws. And I think as a leader, that's an extremely powerful thing to do. If they see that you're okay with owning it, you can joke around about something silly that happens or you did. One time I was going to work and
Is this real story?
it is a real story.
Okay.
And it was me, a rabbi, and a priest. But I'm going to work and it's raining out in Los Angeles. That's pretty rare, but it was pouring rain. And I was on a bridge walking. I was literally like, very close. I lived very close to my office.
Are you a rabbi and a priest who are in California walking across a bridge in the rain?
In the rain, yes. This is extremely plausible already. No, I was just, I left the rabbi and the priest at home. But I was walking across the bridge and it was some puddling on the bridge and a car's coming. And my option is get drenched or jump over the bridge, right? Which I wasn't about to do. I'm not a thrill seeker or a dangerous man in any manner. So I just knew it was coming and I tried to get out of it, try to minimize it, which was silly. Just a tidal wave.
Oh.
So by the time I get to work, I take my coat off and I have a suit underneath, and like where the coat ended, it's just a different color. And I'm just literally drenched, right? So I knew this was a great opportunity to go in the office, kind of like with an attitude of like that I was a little bit mad about it, even though I had kind of made peace with it by the time I got to the door, because I knew that they would love it. I knew that would be something that would, I'd come in and they'd get a kick out of it, or it would set a nice tone with a laugh for the day. It was completely at my expense, but that's fun. That's some of the best humor you can use is self-deprecating.
Well, because you brought up, attire. I have got two stories. I'm not going to go in depth with them in our conversation, but they have to do with shoes.
Huh.
Shoes and me don't always have a good relationship. And so my first day in the Corps, like I said, I'm not going to go deep into the content. I lost one of my shoes. This is the first day in my first job as, after high school. I was in the Marine Corps and I lost my shoe in the chow hall. And then the other one, and so that was a bad situation, but over time, I'm able to talk about it as a comic relief effort when I do icebreakers in the college classroom. And so I've learned to use that, my story, to kind of ease into, getting, building rapport with my students.
Right.
And then years later, and so now I am a college professor, and this was happening a couple of years back, again with my shoe. And so I get to work, I'm walking down the hall to the classroom, and my sole falls off. It literally rips off my shoe. And
I've had
so,
that happen in school, but more of this soul.
well, now I got like one shoe and one shoe. My left shoe is, and it's always my right shoe. And
Was it
I
on
have
a little bit, so it's still kind of flapping with
so
you?
I tear it off because now it's no use to me at all. And so so I had a choice. Well, now I've got again, one shoe on and one shoe off. And what do you do? So I ended up just taking both shoes off to teach
Yeah, gotta own it
class.
at that
So
point.
I owned it.
Sit crisscross applesauce in the middle of the desk and just let them think it's an aesthetic.
So it's like these weird situations. So I could see because it's not really insultful. I'm not insulting myself by taking off my shoe. I'm just kind of making light of the situation and, just owning it as being human, I guess, and just kind of being human and vulnerable. And I've seen, colleagues, and, once you reach this doctorate level,
Right.
People get really weird with the title and they think they're more than what they are and they're more human or whatever that is. And I know people who, if they were in that situation, probably wouldn't have handled it the same way as I did.
Well, a lot of people have, some people would have just been mortified
Yeah.
and they wouldn't have known what to do. Some people would have been defensive. It's all sort of that. It goes to show your confidence level. But you said something earlier, and I'm going to call you on it, that was not true.
What?
Okay, so as a teacher, you are in a leadership capacity with your students.
Yeah, that's by nature part of the part of the.
Absolutely. You said I've never experienced humor in leadership before, and you.
Well,
I did.
I never connected the two.
Yeah. But just so you know, you absolutely have not only experienced it, you've enabled it, and that's great. And that's everything you just said is exactly what it is. It's you share a story that's funny but not threatening to anyone.
Right.
You're letting the people who are counting on you know that, I'm a real person. I'm human. It's cool. We want to all do good work and we want to have a good feel. We want to have a good culture in this classroom. And so that's exactly what it is. That's the positive effect of humor and leadership.
Oh.
And you've seen it, you felt it. And then how does your class react? I'm going to start asking you questions.
Well, I'm not the answer guy. I'm the question guy.
We'll get Allen Iverson in here.
I need to connect with him.
Yeah.
But it was like, and again, this was years back, and so it's not anything like immediately, on my mind. I don't even really think about it. I just thought about it because of the story that you told. But it was really, my shoe, really? Why my shoe? And it's like, oh, but in the big scope of things, I don't know how to use appropriately. So I don't know how to use humor. That just happened. That was a situation that happened. And I just kind of, went with the flow. But I wouldn't know how to use humor to make a situation better or more comfortable. Like I don't, like I said, I've had a conversation with, Reverend Michaels, and she said, I could teach you to be funny.
Right.
Well, I don't believe it. Well, but she said, I can be taught how to be funny. Can I be taught can you teach somebody how to be funny?
Yes.
Okay.
Without question. Can you teach somebody mathematics?
Yeah.
Same difference. Are some people really inclined for mathematics? They can maybe get into your deeper and deeper math equations. Yeah. Some people just have a talent for it.
Yeah.
But can anybody learn how to add and subtract?
You would think so. Well, for the majority, yeah.
For the majority, right? Like, and that's it. It's the exact same thing. Comedy is formulas, just like mathematics.
Huh.
And some people have the switch for it already, like some people do in mathematics or any other discipline. And so they can take those concepts and run with them. A lot of times they can even be more self-taught and be able to achieve the same things. And they can probably go further. But I think I'll not only say anybody can learn how to be funny, I think anybody could, and depending upon your talent level, this could be a little challenging for some, and it might take a while. I think anybody could be paid as a comedian.
Dang. Really?
Absolutely, because once you learn it, then you just have to practice it on stage enough and follow the formulas, and maybe have somebody to check you on, you might need some outside advice occasionally, but I think absolutely anybody can do it. I've seen people who have no talent for comedy, who have out-earned me as a comedian 100 to 1. And that's, and it's because they were a student of comedy. They learned it. They put in a ton of effort over and over again to get better and better at it. And they're still, to be honest, they're functionally good comedians. These are the kind of comedians who, and there's, I'm not saying everybody who's on a cruise ship is talentless. I'm not saying that by any means, but that's the kind of gig, those kind of like gigs and corporate comedy. And again, there's a lot of super talented people in all of these places,
right?
But you can get good enough to do that, just a cookie cutter stand-up routine that average John Q public would find funny enough. And as long as you're safe and you're following the rules, you can get paid. So I think that for sure.
So maybe part of the leadership journey, becoming a good leader, because we both know professionals out there who talk about vulnerability and the humility and the humanity of the person. Maybe they should learn the technical components of humor. Maybe that would add would that add value to the individual as a leader?
Certainly. I don't know that it's not like you can't be a great leader without it. I don't believe that. But I believe that, and I've found this obviously my whole life, humor has been a big part of it. So in all aspects, what I find that humor isn't necessarily the tinder or the fuel, but it is an accelerant. It is something that.
But you said earlier, it brings people together.
Absolutely.
If we didn't say it in the recording, we definitely had it prior to the recording. It releases emotion, it makes us feel good, and it connects us.
Yes, it creates a shared experience.
Okay,
if you've ever been to a comedy club, punchline hits, whole room laughs. At that moment, it goes from being, and I've seen this happen more times than I can count, especially with the first comedian, that first big laugh of the night. You see a collection of people who just finished their work and all showed up at a place. They all have the normal self-conscious feelings that all humans have as individuals.
Right.
And I've seen that first big laugh, it turns them into an audience. From a bunch of individuals into an audience. And then from there, it's a whole different dynamic. It's people settle in, they're no longer self-conscious, they're ready to laugh, they're leaning forward, and you create a shared experience. And so at the end of that comedy show, if you were to bump into somebody, a stranger at the bus stop a week later, and you're just having a conversation, and somebody says, yeah, I went to see that Brandon Ficara over at the Haha Cafe in North Hollywood last Tuesday, and they were there too, they now have a bond with this person because they know that they shared that emotional experience together. And it's, oh my God, I was there too. Wasn't it so funny? Wasn't he so tall and handsome? They'll say things like that. And it's when you do that in a work environment, it also takes it from being a bunch of individuals doing their little functions and turns it into a bonded organism. And that's what humor can do. Now, humor is not the only way to get there, but
it's a good way to get there.
It's my go-to.
Okay.
But it's an accelerant to get there. You can get there just by hanging in there long enough, and people just get to know each other naturally. And
well, that's not what you want. I mean, you want
you want that at whatever pace it happens. But if you can get it faster, it's better for the organization and all the people within. So certainly not everybody has the talent to do it, or the skill.
Well, wait a second.
So
We agreed that it can be learned, and so
what it can be,
I'm going to be
but
a proponent then to learn it. Well, I'm not going to learn it.
yeah, I think it's a
Probably
great
should.
idea. I think it's a great idea. I think it's something that you were mentioning, and I'm struggling with her name.
Reverend Michaels.
Reverend Michaels. You were mentioning that Reverend Michaels teaches humor to organizations. I would absolutely. I don't know Reverend Michaels yet, or
We're going
her
to connect.
work, and I'm looking forward to it. That said, because I've never heard of anybody doing that, I would recommend her right now, sight unseen, because I understand that like that can only lead to good things. That
Okay.
can only be something that, even if it just opens people's minds to the possibility. But I'm looking forward to hearing from her at some point. Yeah.
Okay, I'll do that. So we've talked about the good and the value that would add to the organization and the people in the organization, but we have to be careful. If we said it on record or prior to going on record, humor can be used to hurt.
Yes.
If and that's and it's done. People actually do use humor to hurt.
Yeah.
And that's bad. So I'm just gonna say it out loud. It's bad to do that because I'm never a proponent of intentionally hurting somebody physically or hurting somebody, emotionally or psychologically. That's not my game. I'm not into that. So talk about that. Talk
Okay.
about, what to be conscious and aware of as somebody who's trying to do it and things to avoid. Can you add something?
I absolutely can. Yeah.
Okay.
It's something I've given a lot of thought, and as I've evolved, because early in my career, I had a comedy background and I was new in leadership, and I had, friends. We're both from the same part of the world where,
Are you and me?
yeah.
Oh, the East
Yeah.
Coast?
Well, Philly in general.
Yeah, right. I was
born
going to narrow down
Yeah.
the space.
I
Yeah.
was born in Northeast Philadelphia
Yeah.
and grew up in Ocean City, New Jersey. So
God, we are from the same space.
Yeah, it's a hard charging cruise that people run with. Everybody's nothing's safe, nothing's off limits.
What high school did you go to?
I went to Ocean City High School.
Oh God. Okay.
But
Sorry, get back.
Yeah,
I'm sorry because I went to Father Judge, and so it was a long.
My father went to Father Judge.
Oh my God.
And my Uncle Jay went to Father Judge.
So we're gonna have a talk after. Anyway.
Yeah. I know about Jug. Is it?
What?
And they might not have had it for you youngsters, but it was like almost like being like put in like detention, but it was like very intense.
Yeah. Oh God.
But anywho, to get back, take this
So
back on track.
how can we not? What should we do to not? How do we use humor correctly so we don't hurt somebody?
Well, I think it's important to first understand the dynamic. I mentioned the leader coming in the room and slamming a door, and and so people are depending upon that person to set that tone, as I said. So it's not just that you're going to hurt somebody. You mentioned that humor can hurt, and it absolutely can. In a personal, you and I don't depend on each other for anything, but I guarantee you we could hurt each other with a mean joke, right? On some level.
Well, you could probably do it better than I can, because
without question.
Yeah.
But that's okay. You can say, all the things people from Philly would say to somebody who did that, and then at least you said your piece, and we move on with our lives.
Right.
When it's your boss, you can't fight. You don't feel like you can fight back. So it's a very unsafe feeling. It's a very uneasy feeling, and it's even more hurtful because you don't even have, because of the power dynamic, you can't really defend yourself to the degree that you would like to. And it creates tremendous resentments. And it's an incredibly corrosive act to do that. Now, here's the number one culprit of this is sarcasm. Sarcasm in every walk of life, I think, is it's being passive aggressive and mean under the guise of being funny. It's not humor. Like, it's maybe if you're a teenager, you can get away with it. Mm-hmm. As we get into our adult lives, I feel like sarcasm is generally not a useful form of humor.
Okay.
And in leadership, it's even worse. It's the absolute worst kind of humor, because you also set a tone. You say that this is okay to be sarcastic, and then you have your whole office. You set that tone. You build that culture of sarcasm, which is the least productive, kind of humor you could have. Also, like any sort of an attack humor. HR hates the idea of humor and leadership.
Really?
They don't like. Oh, HR would prefer nobody ever joked, ever.
Ever,
Right? I'm not speaking for all of HR people and departments, but by and large, humor can create problems, right? So all of the things that would create problems, sexual things, physical things, where you're from, who you love, any of those things that we know not to, all the third rails of HR, are never okay to joke about. It's never okay to joke about somebody's appearance, especially if they're, and it might not be something where you're saying, hey, that guy's got bug eyes. It might not be something that's always their appearance, but it could be that they look disheveled. And instead of calling their office and saying something helpful, like, hey, is everything okay? I notice you're not as pulled together as you usually are, so I want to make sure that you're okay. And instead of doing that, you go, oh man, here's somebody had the walk of shame today, or he throws some little shot at them because you don't like the fact that they don't look ready to go. Now you've not only alerted them to the fact that they can't trust you, but you've alerted the rest of the office that it's okay to fire at that person. And then if you later come to find that this person has a sick spouse who's getting worse and they're barely holding on for dear life, then you can see, how negative it is and how harmful it can actually be. Because if you joke at someone's expense, you can joke at your own expense. You with the shoe, me with the wet pants, which sounds like a fabulous Broadway play idea that we need to work on together. But when you joke at someone else's expense, unless it's, like a popular figure, or like, you can joke about Tom Hanks. But when you joke about somebody in your team, it's not, it's very hurtful, and you're signaling that it's okay to be fast and loose with people's feelings, which it really should never be okay, especially if you're the leader.
Right.
There is a loophole that I've found to where you can joke around about someone. And it's a trick of, you can joke around about how positive somebody does is, right? If somebody's really great at a certain thing, you can make a joke about it. They don't make we know he's going to win the sales contest, not with a negative spin to it, but you can joke about situations, and you can actually joke about talents and the comparison of yourself to their talents, and they love it, and the whole room loves it.
Is there an example? Because I'm kind of lost with that.
Yeah, and I'm trying to. I knew as it was coming out of my mouth, I was like, I'm gonna have to come up with an example.
I'm gonna believe you by on faith, but I just don't have the experience. What's that?
Yeah. I said I appreciate that, but it's akin to self-deprecating humor. It's just comparison humor, where I'm comparing something they do great to something I might not do as great.
Okay.
Or something we as a team do great that the rest of the world might not do quite as great.
Okay.
And it builds people up by joking about it in contrast.
Okay. Okay. And I guess it can be, again, only because I'm at a loss and I don't work in corporate America, that I don't get the privilege of being on a team a whole lot and experiencing those team dynamics.
Yeah. But it's, and once you make it, when you set that tone, that is kind of negative humor won't be. And when you hear it, you have to stamp it out. Like when I hear somebody sarcastically replying to somebody who's asking them for something, or I hear somebody busting somebody's chops about something that's, not productive, it's just going to be hurtful, I'll pull them aside, and I will absolutely teach them the lessons that I've learned. And I'll say, look, I know your intention probably wasn't to hurt, but here's what that does. And here's why it's not acceptable. And here's why I don't want you to do that, because unless of course that was your aim, in which case the joke is no longer the problem. Now the problem is that you don't fit in here. Because I don't want to work with somebody who's looking to harm, So, usually most people, it comes from one of two places. You make negative jokes, and those biting, poking jokes, when you harbor resentment and you don't have the courage to confront them about it. So you poke fun. Mm-hmm. Or it's that you are insecure and you want to gain attention by getting a laugh out of everybody at somebody else's expense. Nobody who's secure has ever gotten a laugh at somebody else's expense. It's only reserved solely for the insecure. So I'll also tell somebody that when they come in my office, because nobody wants to be those things, but it's the God's honest truth. It's definitely those are the only two real reasons somebody do it, unless of course they're malignant, which again, that's just a different problem.
So you train sales. You train people to be sales leaders?
Yes. Well, yes, I train sales leaders. I help build sales organizations. I've worked in for a lot of years on the corporate side. For the last pushing 4 years now, I've been on the consulting side, where I've worked with dozens of businesses who are just starting to build their sales. So I come in and I help them build it from the ground up, or they're trying to fix their sales department, and I'll come in and kind of assess it and clean it up for them.
So have you used humor? And if not, it's okay. I was just now I'm really curious. In your consultancy and in your coaching, just kind of to engage and to build rapport and all the things that you should be using it for.
Yeah, I mean, and at this point, I can't turn it off. Like much like that mathematics person, the person who's really inclined to math,
right?
Kind of sees the world in mathematics,
in zeros and ones, right?
Right, zeros and ones, or in geometry, or however, they just see the world a little differently. And as a comedian, I can't not look at the funny. I can't avoid that. It's just that's how I'm wired. So in every relationship and interaction for me, I'm going to always be noticing the angle for what's funny here. And usually it's situational, which is pretty benign. Usually it's something about the situation that's either awkward or silly, that doesn't hurt anybody. It's just a nice, positive shared life. But yeah, I use it all the time. It helps me get business. In sales, it's, well, I say this, and for any salespeople who are listening, being funny can definitely help you get sales, but allowing somebody to be funny will get you more sales.
Wow.
And what I mean by that is, if I make you laugh, you're going to like me, right? I made you laugh, and that creates a good feeling that
I like
towards me. It's like, so thank you.
See, there you go.
If you make me laugh, you're going to love me. If I laugh at your joke,
what ain't gonna happen?
You're gonna absolutely. I already have.
Okay. Well, that's because I lost my shoe.
But you're gonna love me in that case. And a lot of salespeople don't get that. They try to be the funny guy, right. And it's okay to be funny if you're naturally inclined. But what you want to do is allow your customer. If your customer makes a joke, hear it, experience it, and if it makes you laugh, know that they're gonna love you. When somebody laughs at my joke, I make a couple assumptions right out of the gate. Number one, this is a very smart person I'm dealing with. Number two, this person is a really good person. And number three, this is somebody who I'd like to be around more.
Brandon, thank you for being a guest on the Question Guy podcast. That was a perfect way to end the conversation. No, I'm only kidding. But that is, I mean, but that is so valuable. I think those three things, say them again, because I think that's really valuable for.
when somebody laughs at your joke,
Mhm.
if I make somebody laugh, I think they're funny.
Mhm.
I think they're a
Smart.
good person.
Yeah.
They're smart. Excuse me, smart is what I meant.
Yeah.
I think they're a good person, and I think I want to be around them more.
Yeah.
You know, and that's so. Even humor and leadership, humor is not being funny. Being funny is part of humor. Humor is the pitching and catching of comedy, if you will.
Yeah,
Right?
there would
Like,
be so much for me to learn because it's not ingrained in who I am.
so much of it already is. It's just that you don't know it.
I don't know
You
the
know?
language.
Yeah, exactly right. But I think you have I honestly think you have an excellent mind for comedy.
Well, I am smart.
You're smart. You're funny.
Well,
You're
I
a
got
good person. I
one
want to
out.
be around.
Well, I got 2 out of 3. That's not bad.
Yeah, there you go.
And I grew up in Philly too, so maybe
Yeah,
that works.
absolutely.
But Brandon, I do appreciate your time as always. Thank you so much for joining me in conversation on the Question Guy podcast. Please, 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 let's do this again.
At your, this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you having me, and whenever you want.